On the night of November 12, 1994, a quiet suburban street in Cedar Falls, Iowa, became the scene of an unspeakable tragedy. Inside their home, the Henderson family, Robert, Linda, and their two children, 12-year-old Thomas and 9-year-old Emma, were found brutally murdered. The only survivor was 6-year-old Danny, discovered by police hiding in a closet, physically unharmed, but drenched in blood and frozen in silence. When Detective Sarah Morrison arrived, the scene was eerily still. There were no signs of a break-in, and nothing of value had been stolen. The murder weapon was a kitchen knife, taken from a drawer in the family's own kitchen. The Hendersons had been killed in their sleep, but one room was left untouched: Danny's. It was clear the killer had deliberately spared the youngest child. Rushed to the hospital, Danny was a ghost. He was in a state of profound shock, his eyes vacant, staring at nothing. Child psychologists concluded he had witnessed something so horrific that his mind had simply shut down, erecting a wall of silence to protect itself from the trauma. He wouldn't speak. He wouldn't react. He was lost in a world of his own. The initial investigation turned its focus to the father, Robert Henderson, a bank manager. Detectives soon uncovered a dark secret. Robert had a gambling problem and owed over $200,000. Threatening letters had been sent to the house. It looked like a classic mob hit, a message sent in the most brutal way possible. But the evidence just didn't add up. A professional hitman wouldn't use a knife from the victim's kitchen. They would be clean, efficient, and they certainly wouldn't leave a witness behind, even a 6-year-old child. This wasn't a professional job. The killing was personal, intimate, and filled with rage. It had to be someone the family knew, someone they trusted enough to let into their home late at night. With no other leads, the case grew cold. Danny was placed in the care of his aunt, Robert's sister, Carol. She became his legal guardian, raising the silent boy as her own. For years, Danny attended therapy sessions 3 times a week, but nothing worked. The wall of silence remained unbroken. The mystery of who killed the Henderson family was locked away inside the mind of a child who couldn't or wouldn't speak. 28 years went by. Danny Henderson was now a 34-year-old man, living a quiet life with his Aunt Carol and working at the local library. He had never spoken a single word since that terrible night. The world had moved on, the case files collecting dust. But then, in 2022, something inside Danny began to stir. He started drawing, not just doodling, but obsessively filling notebook after notebook with detailed, frantic sketches. One day, his Aunt Carol found the notebooks, and what she saw chilled her to the bone. She immediately contacted the police. Danny was drawing the crime scene from 1994 with perfect, haunting accuracy. The layout of the house, the positions of the bodies, the faces of his murdered family. And in almost every drawing, there was one recurring figure, a woman standing in the shadows holding a knife. He drew her face over and over again, capturing every detail. The case was officially reopened. Detective James Park, a cold case specialist, took the lead. He brought Danny in, not for questioning, but to work with a forensic artist. Using Danny's incredibly detailed drawings, they created a composite sketch of the woman. She appeared to be in her late 30s back in 1994, with dark curly hair and a small but distinctive scar just above her left eyebrow. Detective Park dove back into the original case files from 1994, armed with this new information. He searched for any woman connected to the family who matched the sketch, and then he found it. A detail so small, it had been completely overlooked by the original investigators. Carol Henderson, Danny's aunt, the woman who had raised him for 28 years. In 1994, she was 36 years old. She had dark, curly hair, and, documented in a medical report from a childhood accident, she had a scar above her left eyebrow. The discovery sent shockwaves through the department. Park began digging into Carol's past. He uncovered a bitter family feud. In 1992, just 2 years before the murders, Carol and her brother Robert had a major falling out over their parents' inheritance. Robert had received the family home, valued at $400,000, while Carol was left with virtually nothing. She had contested the will in court and lost, leaving a deep well of resentment. The pieces started falling into place. A search of Carol's financial records from 1994 painted a desperate picture. Her business had failed, and she was on the verge of bankruptcy, about to lose everything she had. But after her brother's death, her financial situation had miraculously turned around. As Danny's guardian, she gained full control of his inheritance, the life insurance payouts, the trust fund, everything. She had gone from broke to wealthy overnight. The motive was clear: pure, cold-blooded greed. Detective Park brought Carol in for questioning. She played the part of the grieving sister and devoted aunt perfectly, denying any involvement. But then, Park slid a stack of Danny's drawings across the table. When Carol saw the face of the woman with the knife, her composure shattered. She tried to spin a new story, claiming she was there that night, but that it was Robert who had snapped and attacked his own family. She said she was a hero who tried to stop him. It was a desperate lie. The final irrefutable proof came from the original crime scene evidence. Linda Henderson, the mother, had fought for her life. Skin cells had been collected from underneath her fingernails back in 1994. Using modern DNA technology, the lab retested the sample. The results were a perfect match. To Carol Henderson, Linda had scratched her attacker, and those scratches told the truth decades later. Carol's old excuse that her cat had scratched her face was exposed as a lie. Cornered by the DNA evidence, Carol finally confessed to everything. The whole horrifying story came pouring out. She had gone to the house that night to beg Robert for money one last time. When he refused, they argued, and something inside her snapped. She grabbed the knife and killed him. When she realized his wife Linda had heard the commotion, she killed her too. Then, in a state of pure panic, she went to the children's rooms and killed Thomas and Emma as they woke up from the noise. But it was her final admission that was the most chilling. After the massacre, she went into Danny's room and found the 6-year-old wide awake, sitting up in his bed, having heard the screams. She stood over him, the bloody knife still in her hand. But as she looked at his terrified face, she saw her brother Robert as a little boy. She couldn't do it. Instead, she leaned in close and whispered a threat that would seal his fate for the next 28 years. "If you ever speak a single word about what you saw tonight, I will come back and finish what I started." Danny's silence was never about trauma blocking his memory. It was about fear. A 6-year-old boy carrying the most terrible secret imaginable, believing that speaking would mean his own death. Carol Henderson was convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the courtroom, after the verdict was read, Danny Henderson spoke for the first time in 28 years. He looked directly at his aunt and said 3 simple, powerful words: "I remember everything." The case of the silent witness was finally closed, but justice had come at the unimaginable price of a stolen childhood. The silent witness case is closed. Danny Henderson can finally speak after 28 years of terror. But this is just one of many cases in our archives. Every week we investigate another cold case, some solved decades later, others still waiting for answers. If you believe every victim deserves their story told, subscribe to Cold Case Chronicles Unsolved. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, share with those who seek truth. Together we ensure justice is never forgotten. Some cases take decades to solve, but we never stop searching. This is Cold Case Chronicles Unsolved. The investigation continues.